Hello, Jim.
Hello, Sarah.
How are you?
It's Sunday. It is the day before Bachelor Day. The women tell all. I'm popping my popcorn as we speak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Happy Sunday fun day. It is good to be with you again and recording another episode of Pruning the Final Rose. Thank you to anyone that is watching. Y'all, if you have not been paying attention to The Bachelor, I assure you, you have heard about it in some capacity from either someone you know that is a loyal fan that watches it, or from whatever news source you tune into, because it is made national news in a way like it never has before.
I think that's true. Like
Yeah.
the way that it never has before is saying a lot because it's not like The Bachelor's never been on, the national on the national level news-wise, but I couldn't really avoid it in my news sources this week. Not
Yeah, I have had people reach out to me about the show that I know have never cared about it or have never watched it before, wanting to get my hot take, which is my own hot take.
I
Everyone has a lot of heated opinions about what is going down in Bachelor Nation.
Sarah, I think you need to just direct those people to watching our show. You know, that'll just drive up our ratings.
Okay. All right. Whatever
And
ratings.
there's nowhere to go but up at this point.
Okay, yeah. So speaking of ratings, I know, Jim, we had a small conversation about this in the last week, about the ratings of the show, of the franchise, and comparing both The Bachelorette and The Bachelor.
Mhm.
And do you remember what those findings were, Jim?
Yeah, and I feel like this is something that I've been kind of willfully ignorant about for a time, assuming that The Bachelor's ratings have been pretty good, or ABC would keep them along for all this time. But if I remember correctly, Sarah, the bottom line is that The Bachelor, this season is down in the ratings relative to last year, but that almost doesn't matter because it continues to be, there are different ways that you can frame this based on the demographic and ratings, et cetera. But if you look at the raw viewers numbers live, this continues to be the most watched series in prime time for ABC. And it's down in the quote unquote 18 to 49 demographic 25% on average from last season with Peter.
Pilot Pete.
Yeah, Pilot Pete. I don't know exactly what that is going to tell ABC and The Bachelor about the experiment of Matt's season. But I think if nothing else, it suggests that the series has some wiggle room to take chances, like one could argue they're taking this season by casting Matt. And I, for one, hope that they are wise enough to see his casting as a good move, even if they haven't necessarily done a great job of maximizing his casting. That would be my argument, at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was thinking about this a lot earlier today because I was listening to a Bachelor podcast that I don't usually listen to, but based on everything that has been going down in Bachelor Nation, I wanted to try to get some other perspectives from folks in Bachelor Nation. So one of the podcasts I listen to is called Clickbait, which is hosted by Grocery Store Joe and our wonderful Tasha Adams, former Bachelorette. And this episode, I don't know if she's a regular host or not, but Natasha Parker, who was on Pilot Pete's season, her famous line is, "There's some cats and some rats in this house in here." Do you remember? Do you remember
I
that?
don't. And when you
Oh.
say she was on his season, you mean his season of Bachelor in Paradise?
Bachelor. No, The Bachelor. Natasha was on The Bachelor.
Oh, on Pilot Pete's.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got Pilot Pete and Grocery Joe confused
Oh no, sorry.
for just a second. Probably
Yeah,
because of nicknames.
they're from
Yeah.
all different seasons, I guess.
Got it. Okay.
And so they were talking about all the drama going on and diversity, lack of diversity representation in Bachelor Nation. And they made an interesting point that I would say has shifted my view a little bit. In the fact, which I'm circling back, sorry, circling back to the ratings and the data. And we have talked about how that is kind of essentially what probably why the franchise makes the decisions that they do is all related to the ratings. And yet you have made this really good point of the ratings considerably are in a good place, knowing that the franchise has made some pretty bold moves and changes with first Black Bachelor, pretty diverse cast. And yet, if we look at some of the other things, so there's an Instagram account that I've recently started following called Bachelor Data, and they pull some data. Yeah, it's great.
I love that.
Yeah, if you are really immersed into,
it makes me feel better.
Yeah, if you want to know a little bit more about numbers, they do data based on every episode, and they will show how much airtime the different contestants get. And time, episode after episode, they have consistently shown that the people getting the most airtime are generally not people of color, which then I think can correlate to the Instagram followings that the contestants then have, which some people have discussed, that it always, like, the leads of color, the people of color have never gotten their, I guess, due followers that they should have. And part of that is because the show has not given them as much airtime. There's so many like ways to like peel this back.
Yes.
Yeah, it has shifted my thinking a little bit in that the followers, are what's driving the choices. The fans are partly what's driving the choices that the franchise makes. And I am hopeful that, and like we have discussed multiple times, Jim, like, is this a season we're going to stop watching? Like, I really have felt that way multiple times throughout the series or throughout this season. But now after hearing that, it shifted. Well, we're already committed to this show. Let us know if you want us to do another season, I guess. But I also kind of feel a little bit of personal responsibility. Like, no, I want Matt James. I want this season to have good ratings. So that's my responsibility in this whole situation, so that the franchise can see, no, having a Black lead is good for our show.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think my takeaway from these Bachelor data ideas is a little bit different, because what I'm thinking now is that on one hand, the show can say by virtue of who they cast, they are doing a better job, arguably, when it comes to representation. But Bachelor data, it sounds like, and maybe your point is that just because someone is cast doesn't mean that the editing process,
correct,
like, the way that they're solicited by the production assistants, there's so many different things about the culture and the execution of the show beyond the initial casting, and its particular racial, for lack of a better word, profile, that could affect. One of the things that we are seeing now is the payoff for people who participate. So it always, from the beginning, there was this idea that if you were chosen, you were the winner. right? If you were chosen by the Bachelor or the Bachelorette, you were the winner of the season. And there have been times when were that not to work out, perhaps that would make you the leading candidate to be the lead to the next season. If nothing else, the kind of second place prize that for some people has become the first place prize is to be chosen amongst the last of the cast members to be the lead for the next season. Mm-hmm. But, I think that your analysis on our series has reminded me that there is another huge payoff that could potentially eclipse both of those. And that is to parlay the screen time that you get in the series into a social media presence that makes you an influencer. Mm-hmm. And when that becomes such a part of what it means to succeed at the show, then those editing decisions, and again, like those who is and who is not solicited or befriended or encouraged by the members of the production staff, all of a sudden that becomes really consequential. And I can totally imagine a situation where a cast member of color would be sitting back and potentially watching all of this go on and almost be educated in the moment about the way that this show makes some people and doesn't make other people, mm-hmm. themselves on the short end of the stick. And at a certain point, it's like, how do I even articulate this? Because it's not impossible that I could make it more than halfway through the season, but by and large be a nobody on the show. Mm-hmm. I didn't get any of the really cool one-on-one dates or, the interviews that I do, in the interview room or, whatever they call the little cove that they shuck people into. Too many of those are ending up on the editing room floor. And so I think the bottom line is that the more scrutiny that's given to the decisions made on this show about the way that they make the Bachelor or Bachelorette sausage, and I'm going to go ahead and apologize right now for introducing that discussion, but I couldn't help myself. The more scrutiny it brings, the more we realize how reality television has so many choices embedded within it that necessarily change the way that we as viewers experience the show.
Mm-hmm. You are absolutely correct, Jim.
I wonder if we should talk a little bit about the kind of breaking news on the social media side of things, because
so interesting segue, because as we talk about the post-show life, post life of someone that's been on the show before, I think we all have kind of been anticipating and speculating like who is going to be the next host, because when Chris Harrison stated that he was stepping aside, let's be clear, not stepping down, because he could very well come back for a future season or whatever, but he was just stepping aside, and someone else was going to host after the final rose, which has, for those that have not heard or watched, is called AFR. So after the final rose, just all the acronyms of Bachelor Nation. I just wanted to put that out there because other people that maybe are now getting into Bachelor Nation, which please start watching Matt James. Let's support him, okay? If there's any propaganda that I'm sharing here, it's let's support Matt James and Rachel Lindsay. Okay, so the breaking news
but maybe not Matt James's beard.
I am okay. No, that is also controversial. I am a fan of it. I know there are some people that are not. he can pull it off either way. You know what? I'm smitten with Matt James. I am loving him on the screen. I'm loving him off the screen. I'm loving his charcuterie boards. He's great. So the breaking news, two things. One is the host for After the Final Rose, which is someone that is not even associated with Bachelor Nation, which I find very interesting. What's your take on that, Jim? Are you happy, or are you like a little upset that they chose to go with someone not from Bachelor Nation?
I am hopeful. I'm hopeful because Emmanuel Acho, who played in the NFL for a handful of years and played at the University of Texas, you might say, oh, well, there's all the credentials that he needs to be on The Bachelor with their affinity for male former athletes. Emmanuel Acho has come to my attention, not for what he did on the football field, but for what he's been doing on YouTube. And that is a friend and colleague just this week suggested to me that I start watching on YouTube this series that I didn't know the name of the host of, but it's I want to say it's like Uncomfortable Conversations with Black Men. And the concept is that, so much of the potential healing that needs to take place in our in the kind of racial strife in America is not going to happen until people who need to kind of break through their own hesitations and insecurities about, addressing cross-racial conversations, sit down and do it. And my friend who suggested this to me said that the host has a really amazing way of like making these uncomfortable conversations possible. So when that is what I know about the guy that they have selected to be the host of After the Final Rose, and I'll say, after doing a brief Google search of him, I noticed that not coincidentally, he has a huge chest. So I would not be surprised, knowing our friends at The Bachelor, that he might become the first host of a Bachelor show to have promotional materials shot with his shirt off. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I do think it's possible. But
okay. Sorry. Can we pause real
yes.
quick? I don't remember who I was talking to anymore, but so shout out to whoever it was that I was talking to. We were talking about who the host could be, and this was before the announcement was made, and just how much of a letdown JoJo was for being when she hosted in Chris Harrison's absence last Bachelorette season.
That could have been a conversation with me.
Maybe, yeah. With multiple people. But part of that discussion was like, did that kind of make the point that we cannot have a host that is considered sexy, and how much of a distraction a sexy host can be? Because Chris Harrison, okay, he's an attractive man, but he's not sexy. Like, I don't think most people would be like, oh, I want to see him with his shirt off. So you just saying that made me think back to that moment of like, okay, I'm looking at a picture of him. He is kind of sexy. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out for him.
He is undoubtedly an attractive man.
Yes.
What a change it would be to go from someone who like Chris Harrison, who love him, have issues with him, or both. Chris Harrison is clearly not someone particularly well suited to have these kinds of conversations. the extra interview being a great example. I mean, I hope that this young gentleman has a very successful go on After the Final Rose. I hope that it builds him some momentum. If he does a great job, it would be wonderful to have him in a conversation for being a permanent lead, because he would solve
lead or host. You mean host?
Yes,
Okay.
that's what I mean. He would solve several of what I've come to think of as the Chris Harrison issues as a new host. I think it's a good sign that the powers that be at the show would be interested in him at the same time, especially in the context of the other news that you're going to share with us. You could also interpret this as being something of a Hail Mary, to use the football analogy, for a kind of last ditch effort to renew faith in themselves with the portion of their viewership who's really beginning to wonder whether they can carry this ball or not.
I am so excited now. Okay, so to be fair, before we started talking today, Jim, I did not see that announcement. So you're the one that broke that news to me, and I feel like after our conversation, like I'm just gonna have to do a whole bunch of research on him. I want to know, is he in a relationship? How that might impact him being the host of the show. If the contestant's going to become interested in you and try to date you, and how does that change the dynamic of the show? How old is he? There's just so much I want to know. And I'm also curious too, because I am still frustrated. You said the term Hail Mary for the show. I'm still frustrated that the franchise has made no statement about this whole issue.
Agreed.
However, putting Emmanuel Acho, sorry if I'm mispronouncing it, gonna do some more research. That is a statement. It's saying something without saying something, but we'll see. We'll have to see. Time will tell.
And speaking of saying something without saying something.
Yeah. Okay. The other breaking news is so the other, I guess, major person involved in the Bachelor Nation controversy, Rachel Lindsay, has recently this weekend deactivated her social media, specifically her Instagram. And everyone in Bachelor Nation is up in arms about this and making posts of support of Rachel Lindsay, which I love. I love to see that people are standing in solidarity with her. But the reason that she deactivated is because she's getting so much backlash and hate. People are calling her out, saying, "You're the reason Chris Harrison is no longer hosting the show," which is absolutely false. Like, she was doing her job. Chris Harrison said the things he said. He was just asked a question. How he chose to answer the question is his own decision and his own consequences that he has to face. But I think she's been getting like terrible like threats and backlash for as a result of this whole situation, which is just heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking. It is not surprising, I have to say.
Yeah.
Like, one of the things we've talked about this season is how, the Bachelor franchise has kind of provided a televised microcosm of the state of race relations in the United States right now. And in that respect, if we understand Rachel's move to be for the reason that would make the most sense, and that is that she is getting all sorts of just nastiness from a particular part of the fandom, and maybe even from people who just like to traffic in the nasty and they don't care who their target is. then wouldn't that be like, it would be taking a page out of the playbook of the last several years of the US. Like it would be saying, there really is nowhere that you should expect to go and avoid this particular dynamic, which is, on one hand, to be clear, people of color and those who support them wanting there to be accountability for statements made and choices made by other people that are implicitly and explicitly harmful, right? And then the response to that being along the lines of accusations of censorship, accusations of cancel culture. They're not equivalent, right? But this idea that the person who is highlighting the problem is the problem, which is, I think, their way of saying, oh, I want to go back to the good old days where people could say and do things that were, sorry, offensive to you, and there weren't any sort of, why should there even, there weren't any sort of repercussions for that. Trying to dial back the racial clock to, I guess, as Chris Harrison would have it, to 2018. So I'll tell you, for something that's going down in the virtual parallel universe of this television show's universe, it feels really scripted in some ways, like in the sense that, like, it's following the script of our times. And it's sad, and it's really oddly juxtaposed, I think, with this move by Bachelor to name Emmanuel Acho as their host. Again, what would I have them do differently?
What?
Hiring? I don't know anything, except, as you have said, they have to come out and make a statement, not just further personnel moves.
Yeah, and okay, if Chris Harrison was the face of the franchise and he was speaking on behalf of the franchise, and he stepped aside, and if that's how the franchise viewed it, is he already spoke for them, and him stepping away is also their statement. They could have easily, I can't remember if we talked about this on live or not, but they could have easily, something that one of my other wonderful podcasts that I listen to, Bachelor Happy Hour, which Rachel Lindsay was a guest host on with Juliet Littman. They discussed Chris Harrison could have come out on one of the episodes before the show aired and did a pre-recorded talking about his actions and how he messed up and how he is learning and growing, rather than just a Instagram post. Like, that would have been way more powerful than what is happening. It would have been more, I guess, just less performative, right? We're talking about a lot of people are putting a black box and that's it. And then you never hear them talk about issues related to racial justice, social justice, and equality ever again. They're just trying to be performative allies. So that would have been a little bit more, I guess, just telling to us that they are trying to do better instead of checking a box.
So let me suggest to you why it might be that they haven't done that. And that is that, and this is very much in line with everything else that we're talking and not talking about, because this was homecoming, or these were the hometown dates. It's the high school teacher in me. These are the hometown dates that aren't happening at hometowns, but are still consequential because we get to meet the family and see what the chemistry is like, and the woman gets to design the date, blah, 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 blah. But a lot of that has been sidelined by what's going on in real time with these cast members. And as such, The Bachelor, I think, kind of singularly among reality shows, has broken now for several seasons one of the cardinal rules of reality shows. And that is that you attempt, if at all possible, to preserve the illusion until the season is over.
Mm-hmm.
The season is happening in something like real time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Reality Steve, our old friend Reality Steve, who is spoiler supreme in Bachelor Nation, has reminded us for a long time that that's not the case. But people like me have been able to do a pretty good job of staying away from Steve's spoilers, even though we know that there's a fair amount of our fellow viewership who don't stay away from it. And so you do kind of feel, when you finally figure out who is the final person left on the season, like you're one of the last people coming to the party. But here's my point, that if Chris Harrison were to preempt the beginning of one of these shows with a more timely announcement, referring to things that have been happening in real time as opposed to happening in the chronology of the viewing of the episodes, then he might be doing something that's in the best interest of the show overall, but he'd also be furthering what I can't yet decide is either the genius of The Bachelor or its worst mistake. And that is that they have kind of let the parallel universe of the real-time lives of their contestants overtake now the narrative of the show itself.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like, I'm not comfortable with saying that this is a mistake because I don't know if it is or not. I don't know if there is maybe some genius in this. That someone once said, and I don't love this quote, but all press attention is good press attention. So your citing of all these articles and all these different publications, not to mention that now dozens of shows like ours that actually have people that watch and listen to them, that are talking about this stuff, it just makes you realize that the Bachelor is arguably not about the show anymore. And I'll tell you what it reminds me of. Like, it kind of reminds me of what has happened with the Super Bowl, which became, on one hand, this national institution. It occurs to me that I saw an article, I did not read it, I didn't have a subscription for it, it was paywalled, but I saw an article suggesting that The Bachelor has become the latest American sport.
Yeah, they have
And
Bachelor
so,
fantasy leagues.
yeah, and so that's not what caused me to think of the Super Bowl, but like, people watch the Super Bowl for the commercials, they watch the Super Bowl for the party atmosphere, they watch the Super Bowl for the result. Well, I, as a Kansas City Chiefs fan, certainly did the last 2 years and met with different results when it came to that. But I think that there are a lot of years when there are a lot of viewers of that event who are there primarily for the spectacle
Mm-hmm.
and not for the result.
Mm-hmm.
BC has a spectacle on its hand. And spectacles can, when entertaining, and even when not necessarily socially edifying, spectacles can gain viewers.
Mm-hmm.
And are their ratings great right now? No, but they're better than everything else. So
Right.
I don't know whether this is madness or genius, but I do know that if Chris Harrison is not going to be on After the Final Rose, and it seems that he's not, regardless of who's hosting the show otherwise, times are changing. What's unclear to me is who's at the wheel of this.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's one thing to highlight, though, real quick, with this whole situation that we didn't, is that I guess the other two people that are kind of at the center point of this whole controversy is Matt James himself, which he made a very bold move, something unlike any other lead has done before. He made an Instagram post that essentially kind of called out the franchise. And what I'm really, I'm like, now with the announcement of the new host, and with Matt's post, I am like excited more than ever now, like in this very moment today, for that episode to see what happens. Because in Matt's post, which I encourage you all to go check out, Matt James 919 on Instagram, or just Google Matt James and you'll see all the articles. There's probably 5,000 and a lot of them will refer to his posts. But he calls out the franchise and he says, I have more to say and you will be hearing from me soon, which hopefully is going to be after the final rose. But the other part of it is that Rachel Kirkconnell, who is the other part of this whole Hot Mess Express, clusterfuck, honestly, has made a post in support of Rachel Lindsay. So, I mean, also to be fair, she made her own post after the Chris Harrison interview. I think it was in the works and was planned. However, her post was pretty, I guess, just apologetic, but in an earnest way, where she was taking accountability for her previous racist actions and behaviors. And so it's just been such an interesting turn of events.
Yes.
That all of a sudden she made this apologetic post and all of a sudden she is hashtag, well, it's not Black Lives Matter. She didn't post that in this recent post, but that's essentially the kind of the feeling, the thought of her recent post that's in support of Rachel Lindsay. So, I mean, Matt James is picking Rachel. He is probably breaking up with her. And now what's going to happen with this conversation between the two of them after all of this that has gone on?
And herein lies, this is the spiral, right? Because on one hand, I couldn't care less. And I am utterly intrigued. And what I mean by that is, in some ways, I could not care less how the show turns out narratively. Mm-hmm. Very much am interested in how the show turns out with respect to its profile, and these real-time narratives. I just want to admit, like, what Rachel is doing, Rachel Kirkconnell, what Matt is doing with respect to the roles that they agreed to play on this show, I have to believe is breaking contract. That said, and so my point is that, like, it's consequential. Like, I think that these are two young people who have decided that there is something bigger than their participation on a television show that's going on here. And I think Rachel, particularly in her position, is one who probably doesn't imagine that she would have found herself in this situation. Whereas, I think Matt is wise enough of a young man to know that, as he said at the beginning of the season, that this was just going to be really complicated territory to navigate. But here would be my final point. All of the stuff that we're talking about, all of it, not one bit of it happened on The Bachelor.
Yeah.
None of it.
You're exactly right. That's wild. That is absolutely wild.
And yet it happened during of The Bachelor, which is to say that it can necessarily affect the ratings of The Bachelor. It can cause viewers like myself to have a very kind of ambivalent experience with the show. And I'll go back to the fact, I don't know whether this is genius or madness. I don't know whether this is accident.
Those are kind of the same, aren't they? They're two sides of the same coin, I guess.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, people choose genius and avoid madness, but you're right. I mean, it's like, it's certainly outside of the box both ways. And I'll only say that I was not ready for this.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's really interesting that you and I started this show with this general idea that you were going to be the person who came in with this experience of the show as it happens in the virtual space in real time. And I was coming from it from a more, not only just a traditional viewer of the show, but a more traditional viewer of television.
That
And
is long gone now.
well, it is, and yet by the same token, it's not irrelevant. Because there are people above the age of 35 who watch this show, and we're reflecting on a very different set of experiences in that respect. And so I will admit that I do not regularly get on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
I've been on more in the last couple of days than I have been in quite a while. And that's in part because I no longer see these accounts as being purely self-promotion. I see some of them as being breaking news for things that are going to happen that affect the show as I watch it.
That's a whole can of worms, Jim. Like,
Yeah.
that's like, that could have so many more discussions of like how social media is the new way. Well, I mean, it has been, and it just continues to become more and more powerful and more dangerous, and all of the things that
All the
we don't
things.
have time to go into.
Yeah.
Um, any like last statements, because I know we had some other talking points, but we want to be mindful of time too. So any other, like, I guess, key points that you wanted to make in relation to this last episode with hometowns, or anything Bachelor Nation?
Yeah. I believe that I shared with you a couple days ago that I have not been a very regular viewer of the Women or Men Tell All,
Mm-hmm.
because of the kind of, just like
Cattiness.
the cattiness, and just it doesn't really forward the storyline as I'm usually following it at the time. And yet this season I am going to watch, and I'm going to be very curious, because although all of that stuff and Victoria and her crown will necessarily be there, there will also be a lot else there that bears on the things that we've been talking about, these 45 minutes.
Chris
Uh,
Harrison will be there. Matt
Chris Harrison,
James and his beautiful beard that he is just really rocking.
yes, Matt and his rockin' beard and his karate moves and
His TikTok dance moves.
his silent dancing is right. So just a reminder to our fans that this is not going to be live. This is a pre-taped segment, but needless to say, it's one that happens after everything that we have seen so far, and after something that we still have yet to see, which is the conclusion of the narrative of the season and who Matt ultimately chooses. And so, because it's also an opportunity to have conversations that might otherwise be interrupted by weird date scenarios and filming of random animals on the campus that they're shooting at, there might be some quote unquote juicy stuff.
Mm-hmm. I can't remember, Jim, if you saw, we know from hometown Serena self-eliminated. Do you think she's gonna be there? Typically they aren't. The people that make it to hometowns aren't, but in this case, I wonder if she will be there.
Yet another reason to watch, Sarah.
Yeah.
Oh.
True. Are they going to announce the next Bachelorette, you think? Or that's after the final rose, I guess.
Well, but yes, it's not till after the final rose. It's, you know, it's arguably a way to make after the final rose even more interesting than it can already be, because especially if, as is often true, the lead for this next season comes from the cast of the current season of The Bachelor, then part of what we have is a continuation of at least one of these storylines.
Mm-hmm.
So my guess is that if it is somebody from that season, we might very well see them at after the final rose. But if they've decided for whatever reason that they're going to choose from some other pool of applicants, then I'm guessing that we won't hear about it until like a Jimmy Kimmel show or something. So.
Oh man, well, lots to come. So much to come, and thank you all for hanging in there with us. And yeah, let us know if you have questions or concerns or suggestions, things for us to continue to uncover. But Jim, as always, it was riveting and so much to get into, and more to come for sure. So,
Sarah, if you don't hear from me promptly in the next couple of days, it's because I'm running all sorts of Bachelor data through statistical analyses, chi-squareds, and all that other stuff I've already forgotten.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of that to do. Or just follow Bachelor Data on Instagram. Now that you're on the gram, Jim, you got to follow all these Bachelor Nation and all these Bachelor accounts. There's 5,000 plus. So that'll keep you busy for a while.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. Okay. Well, everyone, thank you. Be safe. Stay well. See you next time.
Bye-bye.